Welcome to the latest episode of the Hunter Baumgardt Sports Podcast. My name is Hunter Baumgardt, your host. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at HunterBOnAir. Feel free to like the Facebook page as well, Hunter Baumgardt Sports. And remember, you can watch or listen to the podcast. Simply search Hunter Baumgardt Sports Podcast on YouTube or SoundCloud, and feel free to subscribe as well. Today, I have a really fun conversation for you. Telly Hughes is going to join me, and you recognize the name from Fox Sports Wisconsin. You're like, who's Telly Hughes? I know that name. He's from Fox Sports Wisconsin when he covered the Brewers and the Bucks for about 8 to 10 seasons each. And he started at about 2009 with Fox Sports Wisconsin. And so he had some great years with some Brewers teams that made the postseason, and Giannis getting drafted in some of his early years. So he had some really cool experiences with the Bucks and the Brewers, covering them for Fox Sports Wisconsin. So we are going to get into that and his new YouTube series called Untold Truths with Telly, where he has a bunch of different guests on, and they have really interesting conversations. Guests from Mike Cameron to Prince Fielder to Jonathan Lucroy and more. And so we'll get into that and kind of go into what was the reasoning for him to start this series, and just who does he have as far as guests and all the different things, and I'm sure he'll have some great stories as well. So with no further ado, let's get to Telly Hughes. Joining me this week on the Hunter Baumgardt Sports Podcast is Telly Hughes. You recognize him in Wisconsin from when he worked for Fox Sports Wisconsin with their Bucks and Brewers coverage, and now he's a host of a YouTube series and a podcast called Untold Truths with Telly, which you can find on YouTube. You can follow him on Twitter at Telly Hughes. Telly, I really appreciate the time this afternoon. I'm super excited to get to know you a little better and talk to you about the different sports going on as well.
Hey, Hunter, glad to be here, man, and I'm happy to share whatever information you want to know.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. I appreciate it, and really excited for our conversations. I've really enjoyed watching you over the years. Kind of first question for you, how are you doing during this pandemic? Everybody's kind of had a different go with it. Whether they've, their job has changed, whether things, the way they do things has changed. How have you been? And I'm guessing things maybe have been different for you this year like everybody else.
Yeah, it's been different, and it has been just like everyone else, some ups and downs, and
Mm-hmm.
you have periods of lowliness and not really knowing, what's going to happen next. But I've actually been very grateful during this time because it did give birth to my YouTube series, Untold Truths with Telly, and it's something that I've been wanting to do for a long time, but never really had the time or the patience to really get it started. And
Okay.
and there's one thing that this pandemic has given us all is a lot of time, and
Yes.
a lot of time to be creative. And
Yeah.
so, I mean, I am very thankful for this time that I was able to birth an idea that's been in my mind for a long time now. And so, I mean, most importantly for me, as long as my kids are fine, I have 2 daughters, and as long as they're able to be okay throughout this, I'm okay.
Yeah, well, I like that attitude, and we will get to your YouTube series, Untold Truths with Telly, coming up in just a couple of minutes. I first want to go into kind of tell us a little bit about your career. What led you to your role with Fox Sports Wisconsin when you covered the Bucks and Brewers with them, and then kind of what has led you now to this YouTube series.
It's a long, twisty, kind of curvy road,
Sure.
but one thing about it, especially in the business of sports journalism, there
Mm-hmm.
isn't one way to get to where you want to go.
Yeah.
And a lot of times you have to take different paths to eventually get to where you want to go. But long story short, I started my career. I went to Illinois State University,
Okay.
played baseball there for a couple of seasons, and upon graduating, I ended up getting my first job in Macon, Georgia. And that was market size 122 at the time. And I was making $17,500 a year. And from Macon, Georgia, I was there for 2 years. Went to Des Moines, Iowa for 2 years. Worked there at WHO, Channel 13, the NBC affiliate, before moving to St. Louis. And I'm originally from East St. Louis, which is right across the bridge. Only the Mississippi separates the 2 states. And so that was a treat to be able to be basically in my hometown and be able to, do sports. I was a weekend sports anchor. And then in 2007, I want to say, yes, 2007, 2008, I ended up getting the job at Fox Sports North. And I was first started there covering the Twins, the Timberwolves. I also hosted the Tubby Smith Show. I did Gopher hockey, wild hockey, high school hockey. So I wore a lot of hats there.
Sure.
And I was there for about 18 months, and the opportunity in Milwaukee came up, and I was able to get an opportunity to just cover two sports, which were the Bucks and Brewers. And so I jumped on that after doing so many things in Minneapolis. And I ended up covering the Brewers for 8 seasons and the Bucks for 10 seasons. And that was my career path. And in 2018, the Bucks decided to go in a different direction, and I wanted to pursue other things as well. I really do have a passion to do play-by-play, and I wanted to do more than just sideline reporting. And you know, that's the kind of the lane that I chose to go down. And then when the pandemic hit, like I said before, it just gave me an opportunity to launch something that I've always wanted to do, because throughout my career, I just started to look back, and I just realized all the relationships, all the experiences I've had, and all the resources that I've developed. How can I turn that into something more than what it was, and just, you know, the friendships I've had. And that kind of led me down the path of doing my YouTube series.
Sure. That makes a lot of sense. And I'm curious, as far as the, you know, living in Milwaukee and covering the Bucks and Brewers, you know, what did you enjoy most about covering those two teams and living in Milwaukee and just kind of the Wisconsin sports scene?
It has to be the passion and just the way that fans really got behind their teams, no matter what. I mean, because people do tend to have short-term memories, and I was there when Giannis was a rookie and they only won 15 games. And just to see how fans still got behind their teams, and especially the Brewers and Packers. I mean, the Bucks, you know, they always kind of had like a fragile fan base because of so many lean years. But, you know, I came in right around the time where, you know, the Brewers ended their long playoff drought, and you know, just covering really good teams. And I also, I really appreciated the fact that of how I was embraced. I mean, I didn't come in with the most ideal situation in terms of who I was replacing, because Trini Kusneric, who is a Milwaukee native, and people loved her, and she went on to go to the MLB network when it first started. So I had my reservations of, okay, how are they going to accept me? And because I almost felt like an outsider, not being from the state of Wisconsin. But the way that I was embraced from day one, I couldn't have asked for a better situation to be in. And I mean, I had really grown to like and love certain aspects of living in Wisconsin. And once again, I couldn't have asked for anything more than what I got. But that's what I really enjoyed. And I mean, and just the personal relationships I was able to develop. And it's not just the people that were on the team, but people at Miller Park, people at the Bradley Center, and just being able to become a part of a community. It was very heartwarming.
That's good. I'm glad you felt that way as part of our state. And I'm sure a lot of the audience does. Telly Hughes joining me on the Hunter Baumgardt Sports Podcast. You can see his YouTube series, Untold Truths with Telly, on YouTube. I'm curious. So looking at when you were covering the Brewers, I think the Ryan Braun story happened while you were covering them, correct? So what
Yes.
was it? So what was it like covering that story? Or were you? Because I know you did the Bucks and the Brewers. So were you all in on the Brewers at that time of year? What was covering that story like when Ryan Braun was going through all those different trials and tribulations?
Yes, I was all in because you got to
Okay.
remember, once again, the Bucks weren't that good then, so there was
Yeah,
never playoff overlap.
that's
Uh,
true.
so once the Buck season was over, I just went right into baseball. But
Okay.
if there's one word that I can use to describe that particular time and covering that particular story, censored.
Mm,
Every day, because you have to remember that Fox Sports Wisconsin and the Brewers are one,
mm,
basically. Like you're
yeah.
all one family. So because you have the rights to carry their games, like you're a partner. So
Mm,
we always had to be sensitive and basically ask before saying anything about that story. Like
mm,
we were really, I would say, steered towards not saying too much about it. But
mm,
when there were things that had to be said, like we had to run over whatever we were going to say with someone from the Brewers organization to make sure we weren't putting
mm,
the team, the organization, and Fox Sports Wisconsin in a compromising position, because we're there to make them look good. We're not
mhm,
there to break news and make them look bad or, cover any scandals or anything. So it was a very, very touch and go type of situation, basically every day.
mm.
But that's one of the things I'm thankful for, because it was a huge story and I got a chance to get experience on covering a huge story.
Exactly. So some a more positive note. I'm curious for the 2011 NLCS and kind of that run. What was it like being in those clubhouses for some of those the some of the celebrations and things like that, and just covering that team because that team had so much talent.
Fun. A
Yeah.
lot of fun. A lot of personalities. I mean, that was the year of T Plush, Niger
hmm
Morgan. So every single day, you were going to get something new from him. Um, and it reminds me of all the post game interviews I used to do, and people used to actually think a lot of those were staged when I used to interview Niger, but none of it was staged.
No.
Uh, and he's the only person to this day that I just had no idea what was going to happen when I put a mic in front of him. So,
Yeah.
but it made it fun. It helped me
hmm
stay on my toes. But that run was just unbelievable. I mean, that was one of the few seasons, because baseball is extremely long and it
hmm
can wear on you both mentally and physically. And but that was one of the few years that every single day I looked forward going to the ballpark,
Mm.
because it wasn't if they were going to win. I mean, it was almost like first pitch, I was starting to think about what I'm going to ask them after the game after they won.
Mm.
And it was just, I mean, the road trips, and I mean, just down all the way down to the music after every game they would win. I mean, I recall Mike Cameron being on that team and he loved Michael
Mm.
Jackson.
Mm.
So every single time they would win, we would have to hear Michael Jackson. And and so it was just little things like that. But from
Yeah.
Prince to Ricky to Corey
hmm
Hart to JJ, I mean, all those guys were great, and they were a lot of fun to be around.
Yeah, other than like Niger Morgan on that team, is there, a specific one or two people that you've kind of, built a more of a relationship with and you've just kind of clicked with on those teams? Because I assume as reporters, like you interview a lot of different people, but there's a certain couple that maybe you stick with or really enjoy interviewing and just talking to.
Yeah, it's funny because now he's the manager, but Craig Counsell, he and I used
Hmm.
to have countless conversations,
Interesting.
and just talking about just all types of things. And but not only Counts, but I ended up developing a really good relationship with Ricky and with
Hmm.
Prince. I mean,
Okay.
I actually went to Prince's, I guess, I don't know, when you get your vows renewed, I guess your second or whatever. But
yeah,
I mean, he invited me to that. So,
wow,
yeah, and it, so I was able to really keep a good relationship with a lot of guys. I mean, even down to Mike Cameron, who is the latest episode of my Untold Truths with Telly.
mm-hmm.
I mean, just, checking in with these guys, because you're right. You're around them every day and you get to know them, not just, what they do on the field, but you get to know their families and siblings and everything. So I was able to develop quite a few relationships. I mean, even Ryan Braun, I was able to, develop a closer relationship with him. But, once everything kind of went down, he really was more standoffish because of the things that, he said, and then what actually ended up coming out as the truth. And so, but I mean, Jonathan Lucroy, I still keep in touch with him. Mike Fires, and I mean, just because, I mean, these guys were great guys, and when you're on the road and you're spending a lot of time with these guys and golfing and stuff like that with them, you have no choice but to really, develop a relationship with them.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting you say that about Ryan Braun, because I think, a lot of fans, like you said earlier, the short-term memory, and a lot of fans just absolutely love Ryan Braun now, and they had mixed feelings back then. So what was it like, because you obviously covered Ryan Braun for years after that happened. So was it kind of a slow process of him kind of being more and more back, comfortable with the media, and then eventually kind of being where he is now, where he, he's pretty comfortable, it seems, and he's kind of like, this veteran presence that fans like to hear from? Did you kind of watch that process happen?
Yeah, I did. And it was strange because, I mean, he never had a problem talking to me. And, whenever I needed him, I mean, I have to give him a day or two notice when I wanted to grab him. But other than that, I mean, Ryan was great. And once you get him, he's a great interview.
Yeah.
But he understood that he betrayed the trust of a lot of people, and he knew that he was going to have to do a lot to earn that back. And I don't think he wanted to do that through the media. And at first, I thought that that's what he was going to try and use in terms of telling people like, hey, I made a mistake, but I'm a great guy.
Right.
And the media to do that. And when he realized that probably isn't the best way to go, because people aren't going to just take a 30, 45-second clip of yours and determine your character after they have heard and have seen what you have done. So it was a slow process, and I think he knew it was going to be that. And it's great to see him get it back to where it is now, and like fans still love him again. And but then the whole debate is going to come back up when it's time to, if you retire his number 8 with the Brewers, and does he have a chance to go into the Hall of Fame and things like that. I mean, all those things will be revisited, but for the time being, and what he's been able to do to repair his image and everything, I think he's done a great job, and he did a good job in terms of, easing his way back into the media in that light.
That's interesting. Yeah, that makes sense. Telly Hughes joining me. You recognize him from Fox Sports Wisconsin for many years, covering the Bucks and Brewers, and you can find his YouTube series, Untold Truths with Telly, on YouTube. I'm curious, from one MVP to another, you did cover Giannis, before you left, covering the Bucks. What was it like covering him his rookie year? Could you see that this is where he was going to be in just a few years, or was it, how was it covering him at such a young? Because we look at those pictures now, and it's like, oh my gosh, he looked like a baby compared to what he's like now. But like, what was it like covering him at that time?
I mean, to answer your first question, no, I had no idea that Giannis would be the Giannis he is today. And if I have to be truthful, I don't think Giannis knew he was going to be this Giannis today. I remember him as a shy kid that, was very sensitive to the fact that he didn't know the English language that well. And so he didn't really, it wasn't that he didn't like the media. He just, didn't feel comfortable speaking because he didn't know the language that well. And I do remember when I started to see him take, a few steps to get to where he is now, I told him, I said, hey, man, you may not like it, but you're going to have to get used to it, because if you're going to be as good as people think you're going to be, and if you're going to be the leader of this team, people are going to want to come talk to you. And you won't be able to just say, no, I don't want to do it. But I mean, just to see, he's a true example of hard work paying off.
Yes. Yep.
He's always been a gym rat. I mean, they used to have to make him go home. So it has just been a real delight to see, someone who really put the dedication into his craft. And and even back then he said, I want to be the best player in the league. And it was a joke back then. He was like, oh gosh,
Right.
You weigh 180 pounds, you're 6'11", and you don't have a jump shot, and the only thing you can do is dunk. But he put in the work to develop other areas of his game, and it was a pleasure to cover Giannis, and he remained humbled and hungry, and but he's an absolute beast now. But one quick story that very few people know about Giannis is actually two quick ones, and the first one is a funny one.
Okay.
So when Giannis first got here, he's 18, had never been to America before. And so the only images of America he had was what he saw on television. So when you are a rookie, regardless if you get a shoe contract or not, they will give you shoes. Like Nike will give you shoes and be like, okay, you wear it, and then you get like a small amount of money just to wear it or whatever. But they will ship you like a dozen pair of shoes at a time.
Okay.
So the first time Giannis got his shipment, after practice, he gets a shopping cart and puts all of his shoes in the shopping cart, and he's about to go outside. And the equipment manager is like, Giannis, what are you doing, man? You could keep your shoes here. He's like, no, I want to take them home, like MTV Cribs. I'm going to put it in my closet. And so, like, that was the only thing that he knew. But,
oh my gosh.
But once again, this is a guy that barely knew the language, barely knew how anything went. So when he got here, he was just in an empty apartment. But it was Karan Butler and OJ Mayo, after practice one day, went to a local furniture store and picked out his whole apartment and had it delivered to his house.
Interesting.
And very few people know that. And that's why, to this day, Giannis has the utmost respect and admiration for those two guys.
That is a very interesting story. And like I'm thinking about him now, and like just the transformation just in these last, what has it been now, 5 or 6 years, that just, he has grown so much just in such a small amount of time. And it's incredibly impressive. And those are, super interesting stories. Love to hear, what happened back then when he first came over. And obviously that was a massive adjustment for him. Not only playing professional basketball, but moving to a completely new country. I'm curious, one more question, then we'll get to your YouTube series. I saw you interviewed Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and I'm curious, what was it like preparing for an interview like that? And what was that experience like, interviewing such a big, personality, but just such a big person in sports?
It was one of my more intriguing interviews, because you're talking about a guy that was a walking history book. He has done so much in his life and so much in his career. And this is to yourself and any other young journalists out there that, strive to, interview any and everyone, just make sure you do your homework. Like I remember just the prep of, you want to go into it knowing your stuff, knowing what you're talking about, and knowing what you're asking, because you should have a general idea of what you're trying to get. And I think that, when the interview first started, he was kind of treating it like a regular, just, all right, it's another interview. I've done millions of these. Sure. But when he started to really listen to my questions and understood that I had done my homework, he became much more engaging. And he started telling me stories about how he wrote an essay and he was able to ask Dr. Martin Luther King a question in an assembly when he was in middle school, all the way down to, he grew up in New York, but he would go to North Carolina during the summers and realize how segregated it was, and then all the way to going to UCLA when he was 19 years old. He was called to a press conference with Jim Brown and Muhammad Ali. And I was just asking him, like, did you look around and like, oh my God, like, did you understand the magnitude of it? And so he was, like I said, he's a walking history book, and he's been a part of some of the most monumental things in sports ever. And so it was just so much you can learn from him, and you really got an understanding after that conversation of why he is the way he is now, and what all he had been through that has led to why he feels the way that he does. I mean, because, when people think about the greatest basketball players ever, his name doesn't even come up, in spite of the fact that he's the all-time leading scorer in NBA history.
Right.
And it's a record that if LeBron doesn't get it, it probably won't be gotten in a long, long time, because you have to start early and you have to play a long time. And that's what LeBron has been able to do. But once again, one of my more intriguing and fascinating interviews. And, you go into it, and I mean, I wouldn't be completely honest if I didn't say it, you have a little nerves, because you understand how iconic he is. But I mean, fortunately, and I've been blessed enough to interview some really important and big people, from Bill Clinton to Kobe Bryant to Kareem. So I think you just have to have confidence in yourself and your abilities, that you're sitting there for a reason, just like he's sitting there for a reason. So it was very interesting, and something I will always remember, interviewing Kareem.
Yeah, I bet you will. And speaking of interviews, I know you've done many now for your new YouTube series, Untold Truths with Telly, and you can find that on YouTube under the channel Telly Hughes Media. I'm curious, so kind of tell us, I know you said you created it during this pandemic time, to interview people and whatnot. What has been kind of your favorite, one of your favorite conversations from the series so far, and what should people kind of expect from it?
Gosh, expect the unexpected, because that's exactly what I have gotten. It started off as a series that I wanted to do to catch up with present and past players and broadcasters and everything, just and tell stories that fans would never hear before. Because I used to just think back, and once again, I've been very fortunate to develop some relationships over the years that I never thought I would have. I mean, I never thought I'd be good friends with Dusty Baker. And I just used to think about all the stories that he used to tell me, like when we would just be hanging out. And I'm like, gosh, if only people knew some of this stuff.
Yeah.
And so that's what made me really say, okay, let's give this a try. And right out the gate, my first episode was with Jonathan Lucroy. And I'm just thinking that, okay, let's catch up with Luke and maybe he can tell us some stories about, you know, him and Bob Uecker. They're really good friends and stuff like that. And then he started talking about the whole Houston Astros scandal and how Mike Fiers came to him and told him when they were both with the A's of how Houston was doing this. And so the other thing that I'm really, really happy about and is the fact that no one has come to me and said, okay, Telly, this is off limits. This is, you know, I don't want to talk about this. I mean, I've had full autonomy over everything. And that has been great because it also shows that they trust that I'm not going to put them in an uncomfortable position. And,
exactly.
You know, and to be able to talk about things. But Hunter, to be honest, it's tough to say which is my favorite because I have had Dusty Baker talk about how he got his name Dusty, to how did he start chewing toothpicks, to Vin Baker going over to North Korea with Dennis Rodman, how crazy that was, and people didn't realize that Vin was a part of that team.
No idea,
to the reigning Rookie of the Year in the WNBA, Nafisa Collier, talking about her relationship with Kobe and Gigi because Gigi wanted to go to UConn. You know, that was her ultimate dream. Mike Cameron talking about like how his son is on the brink of being a big leaguer. Marcus Johnson, his career. I mean, you look at what Marcus Johnson has done over his life. I mean, people just think that he, you know, played at UCLA and then he became a Buck and now he's a broadcaster. But I mean, Marcus has been in several movies. He was in White Man Can't Jump. He was in Blue Chips. He was a part of the group that played pickup ball with Michael Jordan during the taping of Space Jam. To his daughter marching in some of the Black Lives Matter protests. And these are the same things that he was fighting for during the Watts riots in the 60s. And so it's just fascinating stuff. From Antoine Walker hanging out with Michael Jordan to him losing $100 million. So it's just, everyone has its own unique story. And I'm just very fortunate that, you know, these people are willing to come on with me and share their stories and tell some of the, you know, the title says it all, some of these untold truths. And it's been great. And I'm even excited to see what else comes up next. Because a lot of the guests that I've had so far, they weren't on my original list. And so it's just, you know, one thing has led to the other. I mean, down to Prince Fielder, you know, sharing some of his, you know, feelings about when he played and why he did some of the things that he did, and growing up in a big league clubhouse. And so, yeah, it's, I mean, that's why I say expect the unexpected, but you can expect. I will say this, if you are able to subscribe and check out some of the episodes, you will walk away learning something that you had no idea about that person. I will say that. Expect to find out something that you just like, oh my gosh, who knew? Like, who knew when Dusty Baker got drafted, Hank Aaron called his parents and said, hey, I'll look after him. Don't worry about it. And that's how they became good friends, all the way up to the point where when Hank Aaron was chasing the home run record and was receiving hate mail daily, when Hank would go in the shower, Dusty would grab some of the letters and read them.
Wow.
And be like, oh my God, this is what this man is going through. I
Yeah.
mean, like, people like threatened to kill him if he broke Babe Ruth's record. And so I know that's something I can guarantee that you can expect, is learning something that you had no idea beforehand, because I know most of the people that I have interviewed,
Sure.
and there are things that have come out that I had no idea. I'm like, oh my gosh. You know?
Yeah.
So once again, I implore you, and I will say this: it will take all of 5 minutes of any episode. You're going to learn something that you didn't know before.
Folks, if that doesn't that doesn't sell you to go watch these episodes, I don't know what will, because that makes them all sound fascinating, and just some big sports figures that you talk to, and just really interesting, and just hearing the behind the scenes, and like you say, Untold Truths. It sounds like it's in the title. It's exactly what that is. So again, you can go to Untold Truths with Telly on YouTube, correct?
Correct. Telly Hughes Media is the channel. And just make sure you subscribe. And I try to wear this shirt to remind people.
Yes.
But yes, I implore you to subscribe and check it out, because I mean, you never know who I may get and what they may say.
Exactly. Well, Telly, I really appreciate the time this afternoon. It was really interesting to talk about some of these different Wisconsin sports memories, and then talk about your new YouTube series. And can't thank you enough for the time. Really love talking to you this afternoon.
Oh, no problem. Thanks for having me, Hunter, and keep up the good work, man. And you never know, hard work does pay off.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. That is Telly Hughes. You can follow him on Twitter at Telly Hughes. You can follow him on Instagram at TV Telly. And of course, check out his YouTube series, Untold Truths with Telly, which you can find on YouTube under Telly Hughes Media, but just search Untold Truths with Telly and you will have it right there. And like he said, subscribe as well. And I started watching some of them before the interview, including the one with Jonathan Lucroy about the sign stealing and things like that. And I was immediately hooked. And like he said, it doesn't take long for you to get hooked. So definitely check that out. And what a really nice interview. What a fantastic man in Telly Hughes, and just so down to earth, and just so willing to share his experiences with us with the Brewers and the Bucks, because we watch as fans, but we don't know exactly what happens behind closed doors, or even off camera, right? His conversations with some of the players and the relationships and the stories about Giannis, and just a fascinating interview, and just really excited that I was able to talk to Telly Hughes and have you enjoy an interview like that, because it was really fascinating to me, and I bet it was to you as well, especially if you're a Wisconsin sports fan. So hope you enjoyed it. And as always, remember, you can watch or listen to my podcast. You can watch on YouTube or listen on SoundCloud. Simply search Hunter Baumgardt Sports Podcast. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at HunterBOnAir, and we'll have updates on podcasts, etc. And you can also feel free to like the Facebook page. Hunter Baumgardt Sports is the Facebook page, and I'll give you updates on there as well about my hosting on Sports Map Radio, which again, I'll be on Sunday from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. as well. So really appreciate, again, Telly Hughes joining us. Hope you enjoyed the podcast. I will talk to you next week. And as always, stay positive.